Welcome back to Society Case Files. My name is Robert, and today I'm going to revisit World of Warcraft. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Otherwise, I'm going to dive right in. I pretty much started playing World of Warcraft right when it came out. I think I gave it a little tiny bit of time because I had chosen EverQuest 2, which came out first. The reason that we left EQ was because it was just so buggy that the friends I dragged along with me were having all kinds of issues, memory leaks and various other problems. And not to mention the fact that it really didn't have as much diversity of terrain as World of Warcraft did. So like when you're running around in the common lands or whatever they were called in EQ, it was just this vast area of dismal sort of desert. And it took a long time to move on to a new biome. And World of Warcraft was a lot better about that, to be honest. And when I did get into it, I have to admit, it was pretty stunning and it looked a lot different than anything I expected. It really did feel like jumping into Warcraft 3, but down in the dirt in that third person perspective. I really enjoyed it. I did get stuck in the original classic game because I didn't have as many people to play with once I got up into the late 40s, early 50s. So it was kind of hard. I picked a warrior. It wasn't the best class to solo back then. And I didn't really get back into it until the Burning Crusade. And once they released that, then I kind of started playing a lot more intensely, was able to advance characters easier. And they started to really introduce a lot of quality of life improvements that were pretty much essential. In fact, those quality of life things that they expanded upon over the years through the retail version made it very difficult for me to go back and even try the classic version that's out now. The version that they put out basically to stop people from running private servers, I guess. Now, the retail version these days is barely the same game as what we played when it first came out. I mean, there's so many crazy differences. You know, we've gone from the complex old school MMO talent trees that, you know, whenever you get a point, it barely felt like anything happened, to the overly simplified version where every few levels you just pick from one of three, to what they have now, which I think is actually pretty cool, where you've got a more elaborate skill tree that I think it has a little bit more impact. But at the same time, it is still, despite looking complicated, I think it's still pretty simplified, especially when you get into the 70th level range where you start to get the hero powers. I mean, eventually you're going to get every single thing on there, and there's only a couple of options that you have to pick, one or the other, but you can pretty much change them whenever you want. So if one's not working, you could swap over to the other. And in some respects, that does make it feel maybe easy mode. I'm not sure how people feel about it, but I think that pretty much every character is a viable solo choice at this point, especially since they're really banking on the idea that you can do follower dungeons where you go in and actually do that type of content, but without other players. You've just got NPCs running around with you. Now, I had played The War Within right when it came out, and then I got through to the very end of the campaign and finished it, and then I sort of lost interest for a while. Primarily, I think that's because the last few expansions have done something that has really made it harder to be excited about the game for me. Back in the day, when you were playing like the classic version where you pretty much only had Azeroth and maybe the Burning Crusade stuff, a lot of the content revolved around going to different parts of the world and still seeing some of those cool places. But lately, the newer stuff, you're in a realm where I guess that's not as practical, and plus it's easier for them to make content. So you end up just grinding out either daily quests or even some quest lines that they release slowly over time. There's a lot of gated material and a lot of stuff that you can only do so much of in a week, which kind of sucks because maybe you have a ton of time on one day and you could even get caught up, but there's only so much you could possibly do. So even if you did dedicate a day, you might not really use all that time. And then there's the leveling itself. So I hadn't played in long enough that I really wanted to play my Blood Death Knight, but that character was already in the 70s and I barely remembered how to play him. So I made a brand new character and I leveled them up from, well, in this case, it was a Void Elf. So they start at level 10. But I leveled them up from level 10 to now I'm at 73. And I could say that the process of getting from 10 to 60 is just, it almost shouldn't even be there anymore. Now, granted, it did take me 14 hours to get from 10 to 70. I would say that a lot of that was just lollygagging and sort of taking in the scenery and enjoying revisiting the game, getting some nostalgia in. But I think that they could probably do a better job of making the older content have relevance, because it really doesn't. I mean, you could technically pick any of the timelines and level from 1 to 60 without needing to go anywhere else. So you could technically try to experience, say, the Legion period again, but I don't think that you would get through all of Legion before you were level 60, because you just get too much experience. And if you're an intense altaholic, then you might actually have some level 80 characters already. And for each level 80 character you have, you can get a 5% experience boost up to 25%. Couple that with whatever else happens to be going on, whether it be Dark Moon or however else you get an extra bonus, you're going to really fly through the levels. And quite frankly, I got from level 10 to like 30 just by doing dungeons. And it didn't take long. In fact, the first dungeon I did, I went from level 10 to level 14. And I was level 20 before I had finished 5 dungeons. So it's not like it really takes a lot of time. And if you are really intense, I've seen on YouTube, there's people who are like level 10 to 60 in 3 hours or whatever. And it's almost just a waste of time other than to relearn your character. Like, that's what I use it for. But if you were looking for an experience, something that was like deep and entertaining, I'm not entirely sure that leveling up from the beginning to get towards that end game stuff is what's going to do it for you. And more importantly, once you do get to the end, and this has been true for me since Shadowlands. So once I got to max level in Shadowlands, which for whatever reason, that expansion was just a horrible slog for me. Once I got to the end, I just didn't really feel running around doing what they had to offer. Leveling up your faction was just a nightmare of grinding. And what's funny is that it's sort of like a reputation grind that has a little bit more definition when you have all those levels to get new stuff. At some point, I found a way to adjust my thinking. So instead of it being this miserable, horrible thing, I don't know, I found joy in it somehow. And I ended up getting pretty far in that one. I did all of their little side stuff. They had that tower thing that was fun. I did some of the raiding. I was able to actually really take advantage of what they had for the end game content. For the most part, it was cool. But unfortunately, it was all in the Shadowlands all the time. There wasn't really much reason to leave. And so if you don't love those zones, if those zones aren't exciting to you, then you're going to get bored really quick. And then the next expansion came out, which was the Dragon Isles. Now, the Dragon Isles was exactly the same as Shadowlands as far as how the content was presented. So it's cool that you got a new class and race combo. It's cool that they added some new allied race stuff. They got a lot of content. I mean, it's not like they were skimping, but it's, again, just reserved to this zone. And then they added the Emerald Dream part. But I don't know. For the most part, it just felt confining. And it felt like all the stuff that they had, all of the cool content that came before that you technically should have finished, was just marginalized to the point that it kind of shouldn't have existed. Now, technically speaking, you don't have to level on all of that old content. You don't have to go to Chromie and say, hey, send me to the Cataclysm time. You could level up through the Dragon Isles and you get like crazy buffs apparently that keep you alive through that process. So in that way, that sort of feels more like what they would like you to do at this point, rather than go back and play Legion or whatever else. And in some cases, the older content isn't exactly set up for a lower level person. There's a part in the Warlords of Draenor where you've got to take your mine back for your garrison. And there's a monster in there that I read a whole bunch of people having a hard time soloing him between the levels of 30 and 40. In fact, I died a couple times fighting it before I employed a few more tactics and really went at it with a different mindset, and I finally took him down. But it's that kind of thing that you run into, whether it be a bug that they just haven't bothered to look at because who cares? There's not that many people using that content anymore. Or just the old grind has not been really adjusted to make it worth it. Like, for example, if you wanted to go through and do a bunch of the garrison quests, unless you just start those up and then log off, you're not really going to be the right level to do them for long. You're going to out level them very quickly, and then it'll just be either for fun or because you want some thing that comes from one of the rare missions that come up. And I guess something else that kind of is strange about the newer content is how your character is treated. I mean, if your character truly did come from doing all of the other stuff, like let's say that you are playing the same character that you began the game with. By now, your character has probably cleared several raids and stopped massive god monsters, been off the planet, started a special class order and ran it and helped save the world with that, and then built a garrison and on and on and on. All this crazy stuff you've done. And yet all of it is kind of forgotten, and your character is treated as if they're just sort of on their own, and they keep abandoning these massive projects, which is actually, it's kind of funny, but at the same time, it really does marginalize content you did before. Much like in an MMO, when you have leveled up and you've gone crazy and you've got the highest level of gear that you could possibly get because you raided or whatever else, and then they come out with a new expansion and they add some levels, and the very first stuff you get, like the drops from quests, are better than your raid gear. It feels a little bit like that now not just is the equipment and the stuff you've built up a little less valued because of an expansion, but the things you've done have lost value as well. So you don't really feel like a grand master of some order anymore. You're just some wandering vagabond who happens to get involved in adventures and people call upon you. So I don't know, maybe it'd be nice if they just called back to the fact, hey, you did a great job with that order and you left it to so-and-so. That was awesome. Maybe we can have you do this now. But, you know, in a way, it kind of doesn't matter either, because the whole point of the MMO is to sort of just have a grind. And, you know, that's what we get in in most of these. So speaking specifically to the War Within, I'm not super fond of the delves. I find them to just take a little bit too much time, and they just feel like more of a chore than something fun. I had a lot of high hopes for those when they first came out, but I had just done one the other day and I was like, wow, this is really a slog. And it's not that it was difficult. It was just that it took a lot more time to get from point A to point B than I felt like it should have. I mean, these things are supposed to feel a little bit more like a fast-paced thing, almost like a Diablo Rift, but instead they're just this micro dungeon that your character is, regardless of how fast they are, it feels like they're moving through mud. And I don't know. I'm not big on them. I did read online a lot of people complaining about them, but I mean, honestly, you could find people online complaining about anything. I will say this, the rewards I got were really nice. So if you can get past that slog, and I think it's possible, like I said earlier in this video, there was a moment in Shadowlands where I went from, oh, this is so terrible, to this is a lot of fun. I think that if your mindset shifts somehow, and I wish I could say how it happened for me, what specifically happened, you know, the key that unlocked enjoyment in grind. I wish I could say what it was, and I can't. But if you can find it, then I think that a lot of the stuff in the War Within might become a lot of fun. There is so much to do in it. There's lots of reputation items to pursue, and I mean, there's lots and lots and lots of quests that I haven't done even with the character that I finished it all with, plus raids and higher level dungeons and that sort of thing. And just as a last little note, while I was playing my tank, because the Blood Death Knight is a tank, I did a dungeon right away in the War Within that I hadn't done before, and I thought it was really dynamic. You basically show up, there's going to be an airship that launches, and you've got to try and stop people from stealing it, and it takes off, and you're fighting on it, and then you jump on your dragon, and you fly around, and you do all kinds of stuff. I thought that was really cool. It was a little hectic, and I wasn't entirely sure what I was supposed to be doing yet. My bad. I probably should have looked it up first. I didn't think they'd be that crazy. It was. And despite that, despite the fact that I kind of sucked it up a little bit, I still had a lot of fun with that dungeon. There are other dungeons that aren't quite as much fun in there, but that's primarily because they're just a little bit wonky as far as how you get around and the stuff you have to do. But all around, I am having fun with this particular expansion this time. I did stop for a reason, and I'm almost at the verge of feeling a little bit like I might be done. It's mostly because now I'm staring down the proper end game, and it just sort of hasn't clicked yet, like I've talked about several times now. So anyway, we'll see what happens here in the next couple weeks, and see if I maintain my subscription or if this was just a nice little nostalgic romp. But anyway, let me know what you think. Are you playing World of Warcraft? Have you played it recently? Would you go back to it? Is there something that made you leave? Let me know in the comments. We'll have a chat. This is Robert with Society Case Files, signing off.